Okay, hi everyone. This is the Spin Project meeting call. It is Monday, October 14th, and we have some agenda items today. The first thing we're going to talk about is Spin 3.0, and then we're going to chat about WIT interface upgrades and all of the funness that goes with that. So, without further ado, let's start. I'll share my screen, and if anybody has any other agenda items or topics, please feel free to add them to the document. All right. Holler if you can't see my screen or the right screen. Cool. Okay, so we have a bunch of stuff in progress. We have some, I know Ivan's been working on docs, so that's awesome. WASI config is in progress as well. And then we do have an open PR for the RDBMS types, although I think is some factors work that needs to follow. So we can chat about that. There's still a few items that we can pick up in the must-haves column. There's several things in the nice-to-haves. And I have pinged David about just a status update on WASI key value, see where he's at. So as soon as he lets us know, I will let everybody else know, and we can update the issue there. Does anybody want to talk about anything in particular on the board? Any blockers or anything that needs to be brought up?
It would be good to get a sense of where the RDBMS changes are at. A contributor added this for the WIT types, but that's not flowed through. That's not yet been flowed through to the implementation. So at the moment, this will just presume, this will produce sort of missing cases in the spin host because it's not processing these types, or it will discard them all.
Right.
I,
Yeah.
I looked I looked at this in my own implementation before this contributor sent this, and that stuff is kind of fiddly. So if we're going to need to pick this up ourselves, then it'll be good to know where this is at so that we can make a decision about what to do about it um, within a time frame that gives us time to solve it.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So, I guess the next step, what I'm hearing from you is to ask the author, whether they plan on contributing, the, uh, rest of the bits to make sure that this all, flows through on the runtime part of things. And, secondly, if this person is, doesn't have the bandwidth to do that or is not interested in that, then we'll need to figure out which one of us kind of picks it up. And I'm happy to try to take a stab at it if nobody else is interested, but doesn't have to be me. It can be somebody else. But that's and then the other question that I'm teasing out of what you said um, is is really around the Spin 3.0 timeframe. I think we do want this for the Spin 3.0 timeframe. Is that okay? Yeah. Cool. Sounds good. Okay. Ivan, do you want me to ping the author or do you want to do it?
If you could do that, that'd be great. And if the author is not able to, has not got the bandwidth to sort of do the remaining work, then I've probably got bandwidth to pick it up.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good. All right. Next topic is Oh, actually, this kind of flows into uh, another conversation that Brian and I were having. Um, Brian, me, and Joel were having earlier today, and it was just around the versioning conversation. Um, so we've discussed for the past few weeks now. Um, excuse me. We've discussed for the past few weeks now, like what it means to change the interface and change versions for the spin world and how things should go about. And so, go ahead, Ivan.
So I have also been having conversations on this, um, and started work on it yesterday, I think. So it seems to me that what we can do is where we're not changing interfaces, we will keep the Spin 2 interface. So for example, with the LLMs and SQLite and KV and all that, we can keep the V2 interfaces. We'll just use them in a new V3 world, which will also include the V3 RDBMS interface and the interfaces and the WASI config and WASI KV interface. So we'll have a new world, but what I'm planning to do, what I've got a PR in progress for, is move the existing Spin 2 wits to become a dependency. So move all of that stuff into the deps folder as spin at 200. Then there will be a new package, spin at 300, that will have new worlds in it, which will reference the spin 200 dependency plus these other new interfaces. Um, New interfaces can live in their own packages, so we don't get a monolithic spin 3 thing that can be kind of upgraded. It has to be upgraded big bang. We can just upgrade interfaces independently and then create new worlds that reference those upgraded interfaces. So that's what I'm working on at the moment. And I'm not sure how to test it, but it seems to build.
That seems like a really reasonable thing to do. What do you think the implication would be on SDKs if that were the structure of the world? Like for example, with the RDBMS changes, um, do you think it makes sense to have the is the SDK, the next version of the SDK only going to support the new RDBMS types and that new spin world? Or, is there any thought you've given to or, implications around what changes we need to do in the SDK?
No, so we'll need to make a decision on that. That's not something I've looked at so far. The options are that we make essentially a breaking change to SDK for SDK4, which only targets world 3 and will therefore not run on spin 2.x or any environment that is spin 2.x. In Rust, we have alternatives where we can use features to say which world I want to target. So basically, it could default to say targeting world 3, but you could do a no default features feature equals blah to target world 2, something like that. But for Python and JavaScript, that won't work. Now, I think that they do have options where you can pass the world you want to componentize Py or componentize JS or whatever. I don't know the details on that. And for Go, I don't know at all. I, in a sense, from a sort of spin runtime, spin framework point of view, I'm not sure it matters because I think we have basically no choice other than to create a new world for the new stuff to be in. We've seen before that mutating an existing world is fraught with problems. So I think the stuff that I'm doing in Spin itself still needs to go ahead, whatever the internal structure of that is. But yeah, we need to figure out what we want the SDKs to do.
Okay. That makes sense. Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I think, and another thing that came out of our discussion with, and sorry if I'm restating what it was already said, but another thing that came out of Michelle and Joel and I's conversation this morning was a question of whether or not the Spin runtime would support the old versions in addition to this new world that would be created, so that old apps built with old SDKs would still be able to run in the new Spin world because of by virtue of the Spin runtime registering into the linker the old world. Is that the plan?
I will be very, very strongly in favor of retaining the existing Spin 2 world so that existing binaries continue to run. I would be really worried and frustrated if we had to break existing binaries to do this. Again, we did this when we went from 1 to 2. We managed to keep forward compatibility, and I'd be really, really keen to do the same here. And given that the interfaces are, this is something that always bothers, always sort of fries my mind, the fact that worlds kind of don't exist. And as long as we support the V2 interfaces, the guest doesn't care what we call the world. It only cares that the interfaces are there. Well, your mom doesn't exist.
That escalated. Um, just kind of coming back up a level on this versioning conversation. 3 of the scenarios, it's been really hard for me to like kind of grok like the conversation because there's so many different scenarios, and we have a good number of examples of scenarios where we're going to need to change the interface in some way, shape, or form. So the 3 scenarios that we talked through were or at least discovered is: 1, what does it mean? What does the dance look like to actually update an existing interface? So the RDBMS work is a good example of this question, like how do I update? What does that mean? What do I need to bump? Can I do that? Do I need a major version change? What does the SDK stuff look like? This is what is that dance? That's the question we want to that's the question we want to ask. And then the second question is, I want to add a new interface. What does the dance look like for that? Brian said for the first one, I was like, what? I described it as what's the dance. And then for the second one, he was like, who do I dance with is the question. I don't know if that applies in this context, but I thought it was so funny. Okay, anyways, number 3, how do I deprecate an old interface? And we don't need to necessarily answer that question yet. And jumping back to 2, the WASI config work is a good example of that scenario. So, and then with the key value work, with WASI key value, we're going to end up wanting to answer the deprecation question, but we don't have to answer it right now. So, so that those are the 3 scenarios. And I think that that's how we should frame the conversation. And one good question that Joel highlighted earlier is, are we going to support older applications with Spin 3.0? And I think an opinion around, yes, we should, and we should do that. And obviously it would be really good user experiences if we could, but there is some work to go into that. But I think that's a question that we need to answer as a group as well.
Do you have a sense for what work that is? I mean, it seems like we already have all that code there. What's
Yeah. Well, if you have something, um, like for example, today, if we were to just add the RDBMS stuff to Spin 3.0 and then cut a release into the Spin 3.0 world and cut a release, then the SDKs, in my understanding, that would be a breaking change, and the SDKs would need to target 3.0 in their next release for them to support 3.0 apps. And then in order for you to, and then on Spin 3.0, you would only be able to run 3.0 apps. Is that your understanding, or is it the case that because we have like the conversions in place that we can run 2.0 apps on 3.0, but we can't necessarily, yeah.
in the same way that, for example, we have the V1 config, the V2 variables, and the WASI config interfaces all backing onto the same underlying code. That means that V1 applications that use the V1 config interface can run on Spin 2. V2 applications that use the V2 config variables interface can also run on Spin 2. And they all go to the same bit of code. And in future, applications that use WASI config will also be able to run on Spin 3, although not on Spin 2 or Spin 1. So yeah, I mean the carrying the existing interfaces forward seems to be fairly low effort and low impact. And it just means that stuff keeps running rather than people having to make sort of big bang change. I'm I understand there are issues with how do we design the SDKs, which set of interfaces does an SDK target, and that's something we do need to resolve. But in terms of what can Spin support the V2 interfaces alongside the V3 ones, I don't see an issue there that I'm aware of. But I may be something.
And I don't have that much experience with the that side of things, so I just was looking at the conversions bit today. So if you say it's low effort, that's great. But yeah, there is a question of how we. Can you say that again?
I'm going to regret this. My words are going to haunt me. I can feel it.
But well, let's say that's the case, then the question of the SDK still arises. So we have that decision to make. And that is I think that is a conversation and a decision we need to make for 3.0, because it does set a precedent, and it does impact how we do things for this release, and how we document things, and how we tell users to upgrade. So yeah, that's something that we should get more opinions on. And I don't know if there's an existing issue out there that targets this specific question around how we go about the SDK dance.
Yeah, and I think that will be a combination of kind of a broad philosophical, what is our strategy here, plus individual kind of solutions in each SDK. The solution for Go is going to look very different from the solution for Python.
Yeah. By the nature of Python being a dynamic language and us needing to.
Well, by the nature of how things are compiled as well, the fact that I think componentized Py takes a world as its argument. So changing the target world is as simple as changing changing one string in that componentized Py command.
Cool. So I think I think the next steps are really just kind of getting the rest of the maintainers and folks to weigh in on this conversation. And I don't know if there's an issue for it, but I can help draft that or figure that out. Unless anybody knows of an existing issue for that specific question. Great. There's a conversation we had around like minor version upgrades. Like for example, if you add like we're adding WASI config at the major version point. But say this was post 3.0 and we wanted to add support for WASI config. We don't necessarily do minor version bumps of this spin world. So do you have any thoughts around that, Ivan, given your work around this new world referencing 2.0 interfaces and such?
No, this is something where I'd like to get input from, well, obviously from Brian, but also from Till, Alex, and Joel. There's all this stuff happening in WASI with this unstable and since thing to kind of do something with minor versions. And to me, conceptually, a minor version is we issue a new interface and a new world that references that interface, but that potentially results in a lot of duplication. Though if it's just a completely new interface, it makes no odds. Yeah. Okay. So sorry, I'm rambling. It is like you mentioned before. There are two cases. There's modifying an existing interface, which is slightly hairy. There's adding a new interface like the MQTT or WASI Blob Store or something like that, where because worlds don't exist and only interfaces exist, we can issue a new world, but there's almost nothing to that. You can continue to target the existing world. We still need the SDK strategy in place. But yeah, those kind of add an interface changes should be reasonably easy from the spin side.
This is a little bit off topic or off this particular topic. Oh, Kate, if you have a response to that, feel free to go in because I'm gonna change it a little bit.
I was just gonna ask about the RDBMS PR. I literally haven't looked at it at all except for when you were briefly sharing your screen with it. Is that completely additive? Were we adding types? Oh, okay. Say we were just adding types to that, would we be using @since tags? Like, do we have, or is there plumbing we need to do in the spin runtime to be able to support @since tags?
I don't think so. I think it's at the WASM time layer that where when it's selecting versions based off the interfaces it knows about, it'll collapse versions into the least common compatible or the lowest compatible version that is being requested. But Alex is definitely the person to provide the insight there. So yeah, but the RDBMS types change is extending an existing type, which is backwards incompatible.
I'm just gonna switch the topic just a little bit before we get kicked off of this. Ivan, why I'd love to hear your thoughts on like why have a kind of a spin 3.0 with a spin 2.0 baked in, a spin 2.0 directory baked in, and then reference those interfaces from the 3.0 package. Why that versus having like two completely separate packages for 3.0 and 2.0?
Because why would you introduce a whole new interface that is the same as the existing one? What's the value in that? I mean, ultimately, we're going to draw together a whole lot of interfaces into a spin world. There's already WASI HTTP, there'll be WASI config, there'll hopefully WASI key value, at some point WASI blob store. There'll be, I mean, there's also the whole sort of WASI IO and WASI FS and all of that stuff. All of these are revving independently. There's no need to kind of pluck out a set of interfaces and say no, these must have their version numbers changed regardless of whether there's any reason to do so. Let's think of it as revving the features rather than revving a whole planet in lockstep.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Anybody else have any closing thoughts? Okay, I think the one big action item here is around SDK strategy. And I'll take that as an action item unless anybody wants to volunteer for that. And I didn't hear any, I don't remember anything else. Did I miss anything? Okay, is anyone blocked? Okay, and we did discuss mid-October as like kind of the first RC cut date, but I think this versioning bit really has to be resolved beforehand. So let's go ahead and push off, maybe think towards the end of October so that we have some time to get through the versioning stuff. Does anybody have any objections to that? Okay, sounds good. All right, thanks everyone. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, to Ivan, thanks for the dependency docs. I hearted them to let you know that it's on my to-do list, but I'm gonna go through and review this week and try to get that landed.
All right. Cheers, everyone. Bye.